In a previous video, I showed everything that went into welding and mounting this new stainless steel railing for my balcony. And the next step is making and mounting the wooden slats that will go on top the entire length. So this will be a nicely usable surface, for example, for planters like this one, foods and drinks and other stuff. It will sit on top of the supports here, extend a little bit down here, and then there will also be some pieces between these mini posts so they prevent stuff from rolling down. And there will just remain a little gap here. That's the plan. Next will definitely come the sun protection because it's burning down and I'm sweating already. You might also remember the tree that got pests from last video and needed some care. I've got a few updates on that as well. Back in the workshop, I picked up some beautiful ash boards, mostly for the looks, but it's also a wood species that is relatively tough against outdoor environment. And the batch I got is flawless. No knots, no weird grain, just straight grain all the way through. Really cool. The design is a slatted surface, so the next step is to cut these boards now up into individual slats. And I was aiming for 20 millimeters thickness at the beginning, but forgot that the thinnest common thickness you get from the sawmill is 33 millimeters. So I will get a lot more thickness out of these boards and now just shoot for, I don't know, 25 millimeter thickness. In this case, more thicker is more better. In total, if everything goes well, I need 40 slats, 50 millimeters wide. I have way more material than that. But although there aren't really knots or anything, there are still a few cracks that I have to work around. This is of course a job for the table saw, but I first needed to equip it with the correct roughing blade for straight cuts. The width of the final pieces is 50 millimeters. Now for roughing, I give about 5 millimeters extra to have material left for jointing and then cutting to final width later. This clamping shoe at the end of the sliding table is also a wonderful accessory because it just holds the pieces down as you slide them against it. Perfect for making the first cut to remove the bark and also all following cuts. I could cut 3 strips from one side, then flip around to the other side, cut off the bark there, and cut 3 more strips. The leftover piece from the center contains the pith and cracks, still great firewood. The next board was the same. And so on. Quite repetitive work, but also kind of relaxing. Gives you plenty of time to sort your thoughts or think about whatever. Alright, now I got 42 slat blanks prepared, ready for jointing the first face and edge. And so far, this created this much sawdust. Alright, now I have them all smooth on one face and edge, which are of course also 90 degrees to each other. Next is setting up the machine into planer mode and mill them all to equal thickness. And I think 25 millimeters is what I can get out of all of them. Oh, and now for planing, I got Assistant, which speeds things up about 4 times, because it's basically just continuous feeding. For the first pass, many pieces didn't get cut because they still had pretty different thicknesses, and since my planer can only do 2 mm depth of cut at a time, that's just how it is. All pieces back on the lifting table and ready for the second pass. Now, pretty much all pieces have had material removed and the dustbin is also full again. Passes 3 and 4 are more of the same, but since I recorded it, I now know that one pass of all pieces took about 6 minutes. Faster than I thought. And the dustbin is again full of shavings, so is the machine. We still have 1 mm to remove, so for the final pass I reduced the feed rate, did a test cut, which came out perfect, and off we go. Unfortunately, the edges got mixed up, so we quickly sorted through them and sent them through the planer on the edge to mill them to final width. Alright, they're all milled to thickness and width. Machine did a fantastic job. Next step is to trim off one end and then cut the other end to length. But for that, we again switching blades. I set up the flip stop to final length, and then came a lot of cut, flip, cut, next. Cut, flip, cut, next. And now everything is cut to length, including the start and end pieces and the 4 special ones that go in between the supports. Next step is rounding over all edges. And I'm using a 2 mm round over bit. There's not much to say about this process other than it's repetitive. But it's always amazing how different parts feel and appear with just a simple round over. I only rounded all the long edges with the trim router and will now do the ends on the router table, because that's just awkward and unstable with the trim router, especially on the edge. But it was better suited for the long edges because none of the pieces is perfectly straight, and that would have caused inconsistent roundings if I would have done that on the router table. Okay, get everything now rounded and can start putting it together. This is the arrangement. Just imagine it continues for 5 meters. And now I have one requirement for screwing this together. I don't want screws from the top, everything from below. And for that, a good friend of mine sent me this here. Custom laser cut and bent brackets from stainless steel. Super nice, 4 mm thick, all the screw holes are lasered in and everything is bent nicely. So there's a bracket to screw on from below at each joint and one of these at the end. And on the front, the screws will also be in the back and then it's flush with the edge. In the back, it's kind of the same. It gets screwed in from behind and the spacing is the same as the rest. But before I'm screwing, since it's hardwood, I'm pre-drilling the holes, but that's simple because it's always a centered hole 25 mm from the edge. I'll be using 4.5 mm diameter screws, so pre-drilling with a 3 mm brad point drill bit. Then I made a template piece from an offcut that I can now use to set up a fence and a stop block. Stop block is set up, now the cutting depth about to here. A worthy setup. The drilling took just 10 minutes. But those weren't all the holes. For the remaining ones I have to partially put it together. It starts to take shape. I like that. And because of the way it is, the parts kind of align each other and it's also super straight already. The spacing is pretty consistent. I like that. Now, the screw holes that are still missing are all these double ones where there's no joint like here, but the piece is continuous. And I can only mark these screw positions now with the parts installed. The most accessible for now is this one, breadpoint bit in reverse. We'll leave a tiny mark. I could now use the piece with the marks to set up another stop on the drill press. That should work because everything is centered. First position, we are aligned with the mark. Flip the part around and up against the stop. And we are aligned again. Great! Alright, and after that drilling session, I've got all the holes in the center as well. Also in the ones on the front row, because they were slightly different. They are at a 4mm offset from the center. But it was easy to do. I just put a 4mm piece of steel in front of the fence and got my offset that way. Slight oversight, these screw heads unfortunately interfere with the next part, but that should be solved with a little relief cut, which no one will see in the end. That were all the preparations. Now it's ready for finish, but with the amount of parts, I have to think about where to put them for the finish to cure and dry. So I'm first building a quick and dirty drying rack.
Just leftover OSB, holes, screws and Stefan in the background. And screw to the wall.
Huh. Interesting. Broken off tabs. Perfect. For the finish, I need something tough, because this will see all the elements. Direct sunlight, hot and freezing temperatures, rain, snow, everything. And I thought the best option then is, there is Boats Lacquer, which claims to be seawater and weather resistant. I don't know if there's anything tougher. The first coat should be a mixture 1:1 with paint thinner. Let's lose 100 grams for now. And I roll it on pretty thin.
A finishing job like this seems to be about finding an efficient workflow. Now it's a good time to check on the tree. My mom placed it in her garden in a nice sunny spot, and after 2 weeks there sprouted some new leaves and twigs. It's still alive.
It's now 4 days later. I was working on a different project and the finish had time to cure. So now I give it a light sanding before applying the next coat.
Just a quick pass with 180 grit paper gets rid of all the raised grain or debris. You can imagine this was not the most interesting work, but the finish prep is pretty much more important than the actual finishing. Part of that is also getting rid of the sanding dust with compressed air, and after that I wiped everything with a tack cloth as well. The second coat then goes on pure and undiluted. Took about 1.5 hours for all pieces.
I did also apply a third coat, and then the parts were sitting and curing for about 3 weeks, because I was a bit busy with another project, you know, that little 2-post milling spindle on my main channel.
In that time the tree also grew a lot.
But now it's all ready to be assembled, this time with stainless screws. A quick sorting through the pile to find all the special pieces, standard parts, long end pieces, short end pieces, pieces with a cutout to clear the screw heads, and part with the hole off center for the front row, and the four that will get added later. So far so good. Everything looks well aligned and the gaps are even, but that's just half of it. Now I have to do the same thing again, starting from the other side. So I then have 2 assemblies. That's how it will be transported, and then final assembly or putting the 2 halves together will happen on the balcony. Okay, second half is assembled as well. There's one more piece I need to add later when I do the final assembly. I've got 2 left over because I made them in case I screw one up.
And we're back on the balcony with semi-good weather.
When these pieces now are all the way against the railing, I have about a 4mm gap here, which is what I wanted. Because that also means when I now add this additional piece here, that will end up flush with the rest of the railing. So let's add the second piece. Oh. Yeah, order of assembly. First this part down, then this one. Next is now, of course, flip everything around together, install all the remaining screws and this piece, and flip it around again, like this, and mount it to the railing. Except mounting to the railing is a task I now have to figure out how to do. But I think what I'm gonna do is screw it to the support pieces right about here. Because if you look from the outside inwards, I can reach, I don't know, with a long screwdriver, some screw holes down there, and mount it with some kind of bracket, like this one. This can go around the steel and then screwed into the wood. But before that, I have to screw the two pieces together to have one long element. And I can do that with a beautiful sunset. Holes are aligned, the gaps look pretty much even, but also the countersink screw heads will pull everything into position. All together now is one continuous long piece. Flipping it around will be a bit harder, I think. It got heavy. Okay, I made sure the gap to both walls is equal. Now I can mark the hole locations for the mounting brackets. And right now I'm actually just doing that by making a mark where the railing supports are. You can erase it later again. And same on the bottom side. It's the next morning, as it got a bit too dark doing this properly. Now there will be a bracket here, here, and here. Also there will be a little space in between, so the wood doesn't sit directly on the steel, and there's a small gap for water to escape. The mistake. Look at the end. This doesn't work. Need to remake a couple of these pieces. And that'll take the printer a couple more hours, so let's see what time of the day I can continue. Here are the new parts, and it's actually the next day. Those now fit at the end, so I could mark everything, also in here, and now pilot drill. And I'll pre-install the spacers with the screws very loose like this, and just make sure they stay in position when I flip it around again. Looks good everywhere. As you can see, it's all sitting on its standoffs, and I can add the mounting brackets. Now mounting with the brackets turned out to be quite tricky because I have just bad access to the screws. But what helps is removing this front row again. Now I have much better access to the screws here. Alright, so the rest was a lot of the same, but now all brackets are mounted and this thing won't move anywhere. And now the last parts missing are the boards that go in between here. Woohoo! I made it just in time for another beautiful sunset. And now the next day, with more sunlight, it is finished.
It's now a super nice continuous surface where you can safely put stuff that won't roll down, put on planters for herbs and such, and of course it's a super nice table extension.
Now the next addition to this railing or whole balcony, if not obvious, is sunshade. It's now almost 8 o'clock in the evening, the sun is still burning down, and when it's in the afternoon at like 5 p.m, sun is here and it's brutal and not comfortable sitting out here. But I've already bought components for that project, and that will be the next video of this, I don't know, balcony series. See you there. The tree, by the way, is doing great. Look at how much it grew again. Maybe next year it will have lemons again.